Greetings YouTube, Alan Lube, back with another video, and it hasn't been a long time this time. Thank you Yichin for commenting last time, that I always say that. But yeah, I'm back with another deck tech video. Recently took Bravo to SoCal RTN, 48 players, and you know, the gem gods were smiling on me, and I managed to pull through. And I have another announcement to make actually. I have decided to start a Patreon page for anyone that wants to just, you know, support my fab journey and career. Even joining for free would be nice, but I plan to just be posting, you know, just a lot of additional content on this page. And things are still very new, still very fresh, so I don't expect you to jump in and just, you know, sign up for the highest tier out of nowhere or something, but I'm going to be posting just like a lot of additional content on this page. Not everything I do makes it to the YouTube channel, whether it be testing, tournament reports, first impressions on decks, new decks I'm trying out, even meme decks that I like to make. And I decided to just, you know, put it all on this Patreon page. And for the most part, you'll get access to a lot of the things, even at the lowest tier. But, you know, the main tier will give you, you know, first access to all the content I make on here. And then for the highest tier, I'll just, you know, be doing some coaching, you know, limited tier. I don't have all the time in the world and I don't want to coach too much. But for anyone that wants it, you know, be my guest. So yeah, please don't sign up for the expensive ones first, just because I just started this page. There's not that much content on here that you can even have access to. But yeah, I just wanted to announce that for anyone that enjoys what I do and wants to, you know, see more. I would really appreciate it. Fab has been a game that I've thoroughly enjoyed playing since I started, and something like this will just help me, you know, support and keep doing the hobby that I love. And a little fun fact for those of you that don't know, this type of content is actually my full-time job. I'm also a strategy content writer for games such as TFT and Marvel Snap. Like this is what I do for a living, and so I thought, you know, why not do it for Fab too a little bit. I don't want Fab, and I don't expect Fab to like become my full-time job. I just thought it'd be nice to keep doing as a hobby. So yeah, so just wanted to announce my Patreon page. You can always join for free. You know, you'll still have access to some posts there, but just not everything. So let's get into the deck. As you may see from the title. Oh yeah, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. Before I get into it, I'm not a great YouTuber, to be honest. I always forget all these things, and I don't really edit my videos that much, so if I say something dumb, it makes it in. But anyways, I took Bravo to the RTN, and I played it, you know, my usual comfortable style. With 40 blues, as you may have told from the thumbnail or the title. 40 blues was something that Patrick, who, you know, has been popping up as in the community, only run very noob. After his Worlds 2022 Bravo list made the second at the calling, you know, I talked to him a lot, and he talked about how at least back when he played Magic, there was always this concept of like, you know, to put one extra, or not always, but there was a concept of putting one extra land in your deck. So you don't, you know, just draw no lands. But I guess on the flip side of that, you can draw all lands and not play the game. I don't know. I didn't play Magic. But yeah, I just really like 40 blues. I feel like it facilitates the style of game that I want to play and the approach that I take into most matchups. I prefer to be aggressive and proactive where I can. And I think 40 blues just really helps facilitate that. So going into the deck, there's nothing too much that I changed about the actual blues, except that before I just had 3 imposing, and when I wanted to go to a 40th blue, I decided, okay, let's put in 2 buckle and cut imposing down to 2. So first thing, I know a lot of lists are cutting the showtime compared to the imposing. I personally disagree. I will agree that in the middle of the game, you would much rather see imposing than showtime. There are the occasional plays where, you know, you can draw a 4 blue hand and you actually play imposing, whereas for showtime, you never play showtime in the middle of the game, or almost never. I don't think I ever have really in the years of playing this deck. But the reason I cut imposing compared to showtime is because showtime is infinitely better, not infinitely, but much better if you draw it on turn 0, going first. And with this deck, in general, I like to go first. In the Lexi meta, there was much less reason to go first because she can load an arrow with Voltaire, even going second, so that's kind of not great. So you would much rather prefer to go second. against Lexi. But even against the ninjas, I prefer to go first. Against Aelia, you definitely want to go first. And against all the other quote-unquote mid-range soup decks that you run into these days, such as, Kasai, even KO to an extent, Rinar, Levia still needs a little bit of time to get going. All those matchups I like going first. The only other matchup I can think of off the top of my head that I would want to go second is Kano. But that's a very specific matchup. And in that matchup, you're probably not. I mean, you would, if going first, you'd probably still play Showtime if you had like 4 blues. But yeah, so Kano is really the only matchup that I would go second in currently nowadays. So the reason Showtime is way better than Imposing going first is because if you draw an Imposing, even with 4 blues, you can heave Pulverize, which I have 2 of in the sideboard. But with Showtime, you can make a Surge and heave your Pulverize. That's the big reason that I like Showtime better, is that 4th card doesn't matter. As long as you draw 3 blues and one of them is Showtime, you can search your Pulverize, you can heave it, and with that extra card, you can make a Surge beforehand. And that's super impactful because that means on the following turn, you only need to pitch 2 blues to play Pulverize. So if you draw, 2 blues and 2 reds, if you only had 3 Seismic Surges, you're kind of screwed. Not screwed, but you lose a card's worth of value, or you're praying for the top deck from Showtime to draw you a blue off the top. And in general, I don't like praying for the top deck off Showtime. I always play in a way where whatever I draw, I'm either arsenaling or I'm arsenaling one of the blues in my hand. That's because there's just too many times where, let's say I have the Pulverize in Arsenal with 4 Surges, so it costs 6, and I have, I don't know, let's say 4 blues in hand, who knows, and they come in with a bunch of attacks. I can either choose to block 6 or block 9. I'm always blocking 6, keeping the minimum requirement of 2 cards to play my Pulverize, and then whatever I draw, I can either arsenal if it's a red, or I can arsenal one of the better blues that's currently already in my hand. It's a little awkward if your blues are all terrible. Like if you have thunk, 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 you don't want to arsenal any of those, so, it is what it is. Maybe you top deck a red, but yeah. Just never strand your arsenal off of your Showtime draw. And that goes for the same thing, even if you Showtime for crippling. Like let's say, because crippling is easier to arsenal than Pulverize. So even if you have a red and 3 blues and Imposing, you can still make a Surge with a red, play Imposing with 2 blues, search out crippling, arsenal it, and it's still the same situation of you can pitch 2 blues to play it efficiently, or you can keep an extra blue to dominate it. And carry that Surge over. And so it's really hard to decide for me whether or not I search Crippling or Pulverize if I have a red in hand and Imposing instead of Showtime. Because if I have Imposing, I'm only making 3 Surges off Pulverize or 1 Surge with Crippling. So Crippling, you can guarantee to play with 2 cards, which means you can guarantee block like a CNC or something, right? But if you only make 3 Surges on the heave with Pulverize and they come at you with CNC, then all of a sudden you got to commit armor to keep cards, or you like pray off your Showtime draw. I don't love it. But anyways, that's why I picked, that was a really long explanation, but that's why I picked 3 Showtime over 3 Imposing, just because I like to go first in almost all of my matchups, and I would much rather see Showtime than Imposing on turn 0. Outside of that, all the blues are pretty standard. I added Buckle in, just in case I run into the Stray, Teklo, or Mechanologist, Nitro, Max deck type of thing. Against Kasai, maybe you can line up the Dreamland where they have a counter on it and you pummel your Buckle or something, but in general, that's not going to happen. But it's also there as a non-attack, so it helps against Bolton, helps against Kasai. It can kind of help against Dory too if they're playing Commanding Performance, so just having that 1 extra non-attack in the deck has been nice. Fortunately, I didn't play any Concise, but we'll get into that. Outside of that, all the other stuff is pretty standard. This here is probably the next part that's less standard. 2 Chokeslam, 2 Debilitate. For the longest time, I was on 3 Chokeslam, and there were just some days where every time I played Chokeslam, it did not feel impactful. And, Debilitate is more consistent, but Chokeslam has a higher ceiling, especially into certain matchups, such as Aelia or KO, or I'm blanking on other ones, but those are the main ones, right? And so because of that, I decided, why not just add both? Originally, I had 39 blues and 3 Chokeslam, but I was like, let's add a blue, and then let's add, 2 Debilitates, cut one of the Chokeslams. So when I sideboard, I get to basically just put the 2 that is better for the matchup. For example, if I'm against Kasai, I'll play Debilitate. If I'm against KO or Aelia, I'll play Chokeslam. So that was kind of my thought process there. 2 E-Strikes, good against Kano. Against all the decks, you want to be more aggressive. And also, apologies if I'm being a little quiet. It's pretty late, so I don't want to be too loud. 1 Fate Foreseen. I dabble with the number of Fate Foreseens I play. I've played 1, I've played 2, I've played 3, and I can never really decide what I like best. In general, I do tend to prefer to play 1, but I'll definitely switch it up sometimes just to see how I feel about things. It feels like in the current meta game, at least, there aren't too many matchups where I want to be more defensive, so that's why I'm on 1 Fate. There's nothing worse than you play your Pulverize, you draw up 4 cards, and you have a Sinking Fate in hand, so you still want the card. It's still great value. The op lets you cycle the second cycle faster. All great things. Same thing with Sync. Sync's even better because you can potentially fix your hand, but yeah, I just don't like playing too many of those. Pulverize, I absolutely love this card. This card was the star card for my RTN run. I think it was impactful in just about every single matchup that I won. In the past, I played 1. In this current meta, I thought about going up to 3, but playing with 3, it kind of just felt difficult to find the space for it. I didn't really want to run it over other cards, and if I boarded up, then my blue count was lower and it was harder to play. So 2 has just felt good for me. Same for Pummel. I've been on 2 Pummel for a while. There is definitely argument to play 3 Pummel just because I think more and more matchups are showing up where you really want to be the aggressor, like Dash, like Kano, even Kasai. I want to be more aggressive just to not let the game draw out too long and let their Valiant Dynamo get a ton of value. So 3 Pummel is definitely something I'm considering, but for now, I'm still rocking 2. Sigil, I cut this card and I immediately regretted it. There's just so many like niche situations where it's good. If you're playing against Brute, Sigil can help you bluff to get rid of Scowling Fleshbag. If you're playing against, Decimator Dory, it helps. If you play against any of the Assassins, it helps because it's very difficult to block Assassin's damage, so Sigil is really nice. So yeah, I don't know. I tried the deck for a bit without Sigil, and I missed it a lot. Sink Below, standard card, it's in every deck. Spinal, standard cards in every deck. Something I've been thinking about recently, though, is cutting down to 2 Spinal, just because if I really feel like I want a different card for a certain matchup, like a 3rd Pummel or a 3rd Pulverize, 3rd E-Strike, etc., I'm very much considering cutting Spinal down to 2, which sounds a little crazy because I don't think I've ever played 2 Spinal literally since I started playing this game. But, that's just how things go. Zealous, also, very good card. Prism, Dash, Kano, another source of go again. Another notable thing is I'm not running any blue Outmuscle. Outmuscle is like an amazing card into Dromai and Kano, and at least in my local meta, there's definitely a lot of good Dromai and Kano players, but I was almost more worried about matchups like Kasai or KO that I decided to cut those down a bit. Kind of bit me a little bit because I lost to Dromai, but we'll talk about that. Fortunately, I didn't run into any Kanos. Balance, this card is like an absolute must against Brute. I don't really play it into any matchups other than Brute. Even versus like Kasai or even the Ninjas, I still play Crown of Providence. That's just what I do. Maybe it's wrong. It is what it is. 3 Null Rune, semi-standard. It gives you percentage points into Kano. If you have AB1 or AB2 for Dromai, then you're basically saying, okay, I will just take the 0% matchup into Kano. And I think that's fine. It's a meta call. It depends on how much you expect Kano to show up, whether it be your local, whether it be the Pro Tour, whether it be the calling. So it's pretty tough, honestly. I don't know what's the right answer, but in general, I don't like having 0% matchups into any deck. At least with AB3, you can argue that maybe against the best Kano player in the world, even with AB3, it's still a 0% matchup. But the reality is you're not always playing the best Kano in the world, and the Kano you're playing against will not always make the optimal decision every time. So I would rather just gamble on myself and take the 10-20% chance to win maybe, that'll help because if it's the first 3 rounds of a big tournament and you run into a Kano and you have a 0% chance to win that, you can just scoop, go next, and maybe that extra slot gives you like a few percentage points in the matchup that you think is a little more favored. But I would rather take the 20% and lose like 1 to 2% on other matchups type of thing. Especially because, I've been playing even at large events for a while, and if it's not like Starvo, Prism, Viscerai meta, like you'll run into a lot of different decks at even the largest events, you know? Like I ran into a Kano at my Nationals run that I managed to beat also with AB3 last year during the Lexi meta, so it's like, I don't know. I don't think I would ever cut AB3 to be honest, unless they banned Aether Wildfire or something. So that's the deck. There's not too many other changes. I guess Thunk is a new addition. They really released Boulder Drop. People paid for it, and they power crept it kind of immediately. Was not expecting that. That was a joke. I don't mean that seriously, but yeah, nothing much else to talk about. Gauntlets. I think this is a straight upgrade from Crater Fist. I think all the people who think Crater Fist is better than Gauntlets are huffing copium. Okay, I don't mean to be that extreme, but I do think that there are situations where Crater Fist is better than Gauntlets of Iron Will. However, on the total, in the aggregate, if you play against a ninja, if you play against warrior, yada, 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 Gauntlets is better like 99% of the time. And Crater Fist is better in some matchups 2% of the time, maybe. So it's just like, I just play Gauntlets of Iron Will. Also, I don't have a cold full Crater Fist, and I probably won't ever buy one now because it's like $300 and not optimal in my opinion. So I'd rather just run cold full Gauntlets, which is like a third of the price or less. So that was my deck. Unfortunately, I don't make sideboard guides. I'm sorry. This will also be a Patreon thing. I don't really like February sideboards because, one, I always sideboard in person. I never do it ahead of time. This is because if I have any knowledge about my opponent's deck, especially at local events, you know, you either you know your locals or you like scout around and see. At big events, I can definitely see like, you know, you preparing a sideboard guide type of thing. But at least at local events, there's usually at least like small differences that I'll change based on what I'm playing into. Like if I'm playing against a Dory and I know they're on Dawnblade, or if I know they're on Decimator, or if I know they're on this, that, I just think there's a lot more things I'm considering when I'm sideboarding than just, this is my plan, this is what I sideboard, here we go. I don't really play on Talishar, so I don't really need a sideboard guide to help facilitate my sideboarding to make my life easier. So instead, I'd rather just write out a whole guide on my sideboard for this deck. But yeah, let's go into the tournament report. This is actually my first post and only post currently on the Patreon. But this is open to everyone. So, you know, even if you come in and you join as a free member, you can still see this. As time passes, I'll definitely be making more, you know, patron exclusive content. But, you know, this is sort of just like the type of content I'll be working on. And yeah, you can see if that's, you know, worth your money, or if you want to support me as a player, you like what I do and you want to see more of me. Either way, any support is appreciated, even if you just watch this video through its entirety. So yeah, first CC RTN I got to play this season. The first week there was only a draft RTN, and I don't know, I got like 11th or something, but more confident about CC, but at the same time, you know, I didn't really have the reps into all the matchups I would have liked. Of the new matchups, Kasai is definitely the big worry. Kasai definitely dunks on Bravo a bit, but you know, I'm not giving up hope per se. I don't think it's like 0% or anywhere near 0%. I just think that I need to learn more about the matchups, more about the ins and outs, and also improve my play. That's usually how I look at things, but still working on that one. It's definitely the hardest one of the 3 new heroes. KO, I think, also can be tough. There's definitely a little more variance when it comes to that matchups. You know, if they play a Bear Fangs and they discard Cast Bones, then you're really happy. If they win the die roll and they go first and they play Cast Bones and they hit 6/6 powers, making agility, then you're very sad. Victor, I only have very limited testing into. I played a game versus Patrick on his channel that you can see, but that was very early. That was like before. That was like when the set came out or something. So I wouldn't put too much stock into that game. But overall, not particularly worried about the Victor matchup. But sometimes their value game can just be pretty crazy. So, but you also clash pretty well. So yeah, and the 2 pulverizes helps there. But less worried about Victor, but still need more work on that one. So let's talk about round 1. Round 1 was unfortunate. I paired into Anthony, Crazy Brew Fam. Great guy. Always carpools me to events. Honda Pilot is amazing. He's on Dash. I don't know the specifics of his Dash build. He was on the Evo Arms and Legs, and it was like a hybrid plan. He had pistol and items, but, you know, he also had like high octane and boost cards. And in general, this matchup, I don't know. I would say it's I personally would say it's a Bravo favorite. I don't know if that's true in theory. That's just my experience, at least. Just because Hybrid Dash doesn't really threaten fatigue. If anything, as long as you don't whiff too many hands, the Bravo threatens fatigue because, Dash needs time to set up her items. And even if she does get her items out quickly, if you're pressuring enough damage and disruption, they just start, losing cards in their deck. Sometimes they'll draw an item and they can't block with it. And basically, it just feels like it takes a long time for those items to recoup their value from being played and to eventually, threaten your actual life. And as long as you're, efficiently playing your hands as Bravo, then it's not too bad. This game actually went to second cycle. Usually when I play against Hybrid Dash, I'm kind of just eating damage to throw damage. But my hands weren't perfectly amazing to line up, but I was pitching, good hands. I was pitching like CNC Pummel or, Rouse turns. And because of that, I definitely thought about blocking more, at least in the early to mid-ish game, because I knew that, some of my gas was at the bottom of my deck and I needed to stay alive until then. I got pretty low. I got down to like 2 or something. But he only had like 4 cards left in deck, and a lot of them didn't even block, and I got the dominate for game. He got 3 items out by that time. I believe it was 1 plasma, 2 inductions. I think 3 items is kind of the sweet spot for Dash in general. But yeah, it's interesting because I also got to go first. If he goes first and sparks on his first turn, which he had in hand, maybe the matchup's different. I've definitely still won games against Hybrid Dash where they literally play like an item turn 1 and an item turn 3 or something. It's not easy, but it definitely gets there. Round 2, I played Decimator Great Axe Dorinthea. I lost to this player at the Age February tournament, and I was pretty tilted, not gonna lie. He played great, and I'm not trying to take anything away from him. He played great. He had a good game plan into my deck. He executed well, and I didn't have Sigil at the time. I was trying out different things, and so because of that was one of the big reasons I went back to my old deck of like 1 Fate, 2 Sigils type of thing. And this game I had a much better game plan. Pitch stack the D-reacts if he's not being aggressive. So in late game when he tries to push through damage with like overpowers or routes or things like that, I have the D-reacts to shore up that damage, because if you're both trading life and you go low, eventually you have to start committing more cards to the Great Axe because they can threaten like Iron Song response, route, things like that. So this one was a much more comfortable win. I haven't played against pure fatigue Decimator Dory, so I don't know how that matchup goes, but maybe I'll try it out. I don't think it's favored. Like, I think if you wanted to pure fatigue my deck, you probably could. Like, if you run a list adjacent to Charles's Dunn's Bravo list from the February Age, then you can do it. But you'll have more auto lose matchups than I would say my list does, and that's just how I prefer to play. So round 3 was against Iris Prism, and I was pretty sad when I paired into Andrew. One, he's a friend. Well, actually no, when I paired into him, I was sad that it was Prism because I was like 90% sure I was going to lose, but at the same time I was happy because he's a friend. If I'm going to lose, I would prefer it to be to a friend so that they make it to top 8, things like that. But just because I think I'm going to lose doesn't mean I'm not going to try to play my best. So I sit down and I just try to play to my outs and make the best decision. I talk about it here, but Illusionist is probably the class that I've played the most games into, just because Oliver, my local from NorCal, one of my closest flesh and blood friends and friends in general, we've played a ton of games together. And when I first started playing, I was on Bravo and he was on OG Prism, and he would just beat me up over and over and over and over and over. And even to this day, whenever I'm just like, anyone got time to test, he'd just be like Prism, and I'd be like, go away. But I still play some games. So I did learn the matchup in a way, how to block, how to clear angels, what auras are the most threatening, just stuff you pick up over time from playing against Illusionist. And Andrew was able to get some early tome turns and like present like Arclight with shimmers and things like that. And the board state felt pretty doomed early on. But, you just have to play your outs, clear certain auras, go face when you can. And I was fortunate that his Genesis came up just a bit too slow. And I was also fortunate that he didn't find any Mercifuls early in the game. Mercifuls really pings you down over time, and it's really tough. If their first two auras in the game are Merciful and Genesis, that's like, you might as well just scoop there. But it wasn't. So, I had a chance, and I went for it. And the final play of the game was actually me dominating Pulverize. He was at like 3 health. He had 2 armor block and 4 spectral shields. And I was like, there's no way he can cover this, right? But he's staring at his hand for God knows how long. And his hand is actually the Figment of Protection. And if he had a blue instead of a yellow in one of the cards in his hand, he would have been able to play the Figment, make a shield, flip it, ward 4 and the 3 extra shields, and live at 1 health. But unfortunately, he had a yellow, and he couldn't go for the full line to block with his Vestige and his Footsteps and flip the Figment. But I do think even if he survives at 1, he has no cards. He passes to me, I dominate an attack, and I go from there. If the way I lose that game is if his next turn he has Arclight and 2 blues. If that happens, he's able to play Arclight. I'm not able to dominate. On his turn, he can double Genesis proc, and then, I don't know, I probably lose from there. But I somehow squeak it out. I'm going to be doing a probably VOD review on the Patreon for this game, because I think it's a very interesting game. I think games where I play against, those 0 to 10% matchups are very interesting to watch, because why not? And, for all the Bravo players out there who maybe haven't practiced the Prism matchup at all, you can maybe learn something from it. Round 4, I play Zane on Aelia again. Zane's my teammate, and we played at the Age, and I got off to a pretty hot start, and he clawed his way back. And since that game, I have learned, just never let up the aggression on Aelia if possible. Sometimes they'll have the perfect disruption for your hand, whether it's Fatigue Shot, whether it's Sleep Dart, whether it's Red in the Ledger when you have a Rouse turn or something. But in general, if you're not eating too much damage or getting hit with a ineffective disruptive attack, then you should just throw your attack at them. 2 big points happened in the game. He played an Endless Arrow with 1 card in hand. I pass. I play the Sync. He Rain Raises it, and I Sync again from Arsenal to cover it up, and that puts him off an Arsenal card, which is, playing against Aelia, you really don't want them to have an Arsenal if possible. In general, they will always play to Arsenal 1 card at the end of their turn. So you can kind of be safe from that, except if it's the late game and they need to push as much damage as possible. That's different, right? But in general, their play pattern is to play all of their cards except for 1, so they can Arsenal. And if you take them off their Arsenal, it really, it's really bad for them, basically. So that happened. But in the early game, I was definitely behind. It was definitely a bit of a clawback. There was another turn where he death dealers with a red arrow, loading like Infecting Shot or something, draws another red arrow, has to pitch it to play it. And from there, I'm able to just, steal back the control of the game a little bit and get it. Round 5, I play against Zach on Dromai. I've beaten him in the past, and every time, at this point, he's learned the matchup. He knows what to do. I also have less Go Again in my deck than before, and it was really tough. He drew all of his important threats, Dromai, Mirror Guy, passing early. I didn't draw my Go Agains. I got through some damage in the beginning, but then after that, I was just on board clearing duty. I arsenaled the Pulverize, which was the dumbest mistake I could have made. Never got to play it. It was literally stuck in there forever. And I was just on dragon clearing duty. And eventually I was at the point where I felt my only out to actually win that game was to try to go for fatigue. So I cleared more dragons than I usually do. I usually always leave up things like Yenderai, things like Kyloria, whatever, things like that. But I didn't. And I cleared more instead. And, my Null Rune Boots gets Tumultide. He plays some Chromite Dust. And I basically have zero shot at winning that game once he plays Burn Them All. It's also really hard to play around Chromite Dust when you're on the back foot, because if they're ever presenting, attack actions and you block with too many cards, they play the Chromite with Dust. All of a sudden, you're either eating their full dragon board or you're full blocking. And if you're full blocking, you leave the Chromite, which is terrible. So he did that to me once in the game. I probably won't VOD review this one just because, Bravo Dromai matchups, there's a bunch of those out there. But, maybe I will. Who knows? I think the game against Zane, if anything, I'll probably VOD review also, along with the Prism game, just because this game felt pretty interesting to me. And then my round 6 was against Rinar. This was very similar to Raj's RTN list that went 9-0 last week. And Rinar, I honestly just don't have the reps into. I think in theory it's a scary matchup because when they play Blood Rush, you're 100% going to leak damage, unless you just have like Sync and Arsenal and you commit all your armor and things like that. Basically, they just whittle you down, and eventually in the late game, they can do like barraging, pack hunt, or barraging, send packing, or something like that, massacre, whatever. There's a bunch of things they can do to just combo you for the game. But at least in round 6, my draws were good enough to where we were trading blows, and Pulverize was really the card that got me ahead. And from there, I was just pick my spots, dominate here and there, and just go for the game. I believe, yes, I'm pretty sure, yeah, he was on syncs, so, you have to play around that a little bit, but, once you reach second cycle, you can definitely see if they have it, if they don't, when they pitched it, things like that. So it wasn't too difficult, but it was definitely pretty close. And then, so, going into top 8, the seeding is Dromai at 1, me at 2, Prism at 3, Kano 4, Katsu 5, Aelia 6, Rinar 7, and Dash at 8. And so I don't want to play against Kano, I don't want to play against Dromai because he just whooped my ass, and I don't want to play against Prism because I got the win somehow in Swiss, but I don't think that'll happen again. And luckily, I don't play any of them in top 8. My top 8 is a rematch versus the Rinar, and of the matchups, I was probably most wanted to play either Dash because it wasn't full fatigue, or Katsu, or Rinar, or Aelia, and I got to play one of them, so that was great. Quarterfinal versus Rinar. The game went quite differently than our Swiss matchup. First of all, his first Blood Rush was really bad. He drew into 2 reds, and he had to pitch those 2 reds to play Massacre from Arsenal, so his Blood Rush was effectively a 10 damage turn, and I was just effectively blocking out the first half of the game. It got to the point where he was at 26 and I was at 40, and from another reason that it got to that point was because unfortunately he didn't read that I was on the defensive this time, because in our Swiss matchup I was playing very aggressively because of the way I drew. I was drawing my pulverizes with 3 blues, and I had to surge up or things like that. But in this game, I was just drawing like a lot of blues or 2 or 3 red hands, and I was like, okay, let's just block out efficiently if can. I was drawing D-reacts early, things like that. And, he played or blocked with a lot of his power cards in the first cycle. So once he got through his 3rd Blood Rush, and I was at like, I don't know, 20-ish health, maybe less than that, I knew there was probably no way he could actually kill me. He had like some blue barragings left, but no more reds left. His sinks were gone. But yeah, as I was saying, another big reason the game played out this way was because he arsenaled the sink early, and expecting me to be more aggressive, he left it there to wait for a turn where I played aggressive. And after 2 or 3 turns of his arsenal not being played and I'm mostly blocking out, I kind of had the read that he had the sink there, and it was kind of just clunking his arsenal. Eventually, when I hammer swing and he blocks with his sync, so he can probably arsenal another power card, that's when I can turn the tide a little bit, start trading my life to pressure him, and the game was much more comfortable this time. He claws back a little bit, even if Rinar runs out of power cards, you can still go for like scab skins, claw attack, things like that. But yeah, game was much more comfortable this time, and I got that. So going into the semifinal, I finished my game first, and I walk over to see Zane play versus Andrew on Prism, and I was like, I would much rather if Zane wins this. They're both my friends. Zane's my teammate, but I would much rather Zane wins, because if Zane wins, then I get to play Zane. I would much rather play Aelia than Prism, and Zane barely gets there. I think Zane is at like 1 health, and Prism's at 2, but Zane has tempo. And for like 3 or 4 turns, Zane is just outputting enough damage where Prism has to full block or flip an Angel to block. And even when Andrew did draw his Arclight to stuff a turn, he draws it with 2 yellows and a blue, so he's not even able to save a card. And then eventually Zane pulls through. So I don't know how the full game went. It wasn't on stream. I wasn't there to watch it, but apparently it was an uphill battle for Aelia. So round 4, I get to play against Zane on Aelia. And since I'm the higher seed, I get to pick first. I get to play Terra Sunder on my first turn, which isn't amazing. Like, it's okay. In general, I don't really like Terra Sunder on turn 0 because 1, I don't get to make a surge, and 2, I'm leaking 4 damage, which is fine. Leaking 4 damage on turn 1 is good. But the discard cards thing doesn't really matter too much. I'm not really trying to present fatigue. If the game goes long enough back and forth, eventually I can threaten fatigue, but that's not like my plan A, right? So I don't really care that he's discarding 2 cards. If anything, it potentially helps him filter also. Like if it's a choke slam and I get to dominate that and arsenal a card, much rather do that. If it's a showtime, much rather do that, etc. But you know, I take what I can get. And on his turn, I honestly don't remember how this game played out too much, but it was much comfier for me. I was able to just like dominate Starstruck or Spinals or Cripplings or pummel him, and just my cards were just coming at the right time. It's like he plays Codex and I'm like, or no, there was a turn where I have a card in Arsenal and my hand is pretty bad. It's like 3 reds and a blue, and I was like, I really need another blue. So he plays 1 attack. It has go again. He has like 1 card left in hand. I was like, okay, if it's Codex, then, you know, he forces me to discard a card. But if he doesn't play another attack and I don't block, then, or if I don't crown, then my hand is really bad. So I crown on the first attack, take the Arsenal away, draw into a 5-card hand. It's a blue, thank God. He plays Codex. And from there, I'm able to just, you know, pick whatever attack I want and eat literally whatever he throws at me. So pretty happy with that. Much more comfortable win. We both got our Nats invite. I'm a happy camper. And then in the final game, Katsu made it all the way through the bracket and beat the Dromai. He beat Zach. And I'm like, I wouldn't say it was like guaranteed that I would lose to Zach because, you know, depending on how he draws his dragons and passings, depending on how I draw my go against, like the matchup it can go a lot of ways. But he's definitely only gotten better at the matchup, specifically against me and hopefully Bravos in general. I don't know if I necessarily play different than other Bravos he plays, but wasn't confident going into that matchup. So in the finals, I play against Katsu. He presents Lynx. I picked first because, I don't know, for the longest time, I've always gone first against Ninja, and I kind of switched it up to try going second, but I don't love going second. So I just like going first. It feels more consistent to me, even if it's not like the best. Like, I don't know. Like if you draw 3 blues and a crippling and you're going second, that's amazing, right? But if I'm going first, or if you're going second and you draw a 4 blue hand, you basically just lose on the spot. At least if you draw 4 blues on your first turn, it's like not terrible, maybe. Once again, I start with Terra Sunder, and I don't really remember how this game goes, but I do remember like I could not make a Surge like almost this entire game. And Surge is really how my deck tries to play the quote-unquote value game. There was never really a spot I could find to efficiently make a Surge, because I'm not just going to eat damage and swing hammer for 6 and make a Surge. That's like pretty bad. Either, you know, I want to play a Spinal and pitch 2 blues, or I play, if I somehow have tempo, I make a Surge, play Crippling with like 3 blues instead of dominating it, maybe. I don't know. But basically, I could never make a Surge. So, and my hands were drawing up to the point where I was like, okay, I have 3 blues and a Starstruck. I should just go for it. I'm pretty confident his Arsenal's not a D-React. I go for it, and I get to chain Starstrucks and Cripplings, which is like the best case scenario. He eventually has to block with his Lynx instead of using it on offense. And by the time I was threatening, you know, damage for game, that's when he was finally drawing into his D-Reacts. And that's great because he stays alive, but at the same time, he's not able to crack back very well. And because of that, I'm able to just, you know, get there with just dominating every turn until he whiffs on a D-React. So fortunately, I win there. And this was, even though this is like my 3rd RTN win, and I've won a ProQuest before, well, that ProQuest was a split, and I took the invite instead, but this was actually my first time opening a gold foil. So I have the video here for you guys, and I saved it for the end for all the lovely viewers who stayed.
Skull horn, skull horn.
Oh, it's lagging a little bit. Let me restart it.
Skull horn, skull horn.
Oh, it's going to lag anyways, doesn't matter.
I'm struggling.
That was my Victor promo card that I won. Look at me, I'm smiling so much right now. And that's the beloved Anthony Pham, Honda Pilot owner, who carpools all of the OC boys to the greater LA area events. But yeah, so that was my tournament run. Once again, I have this in Patreon. This is open for any member to read. Just because I'm just starting out, you know, I want you to give an idea of what content I'm going to be producing on here. But yeah, I don't think I have anything else to say, really. That was my run. I'm not sure what I'll do for the rest of the RTNs. Like, I don't know, feels a little weird to just run it back with the same Bravo list. Especially I have my invite, I want the gold foil. Maybe, you know, it would be better served to test like a Tunic Bravo list, or maybe try Victor, maybe not Betsy. That seems a little too meme, but I don't know. Betsy seems really fun. It's hard because when I look at the two new Guardians, Betsy and Victor, Betsy feels like the deck that I want to play and how I like to play, but she just doesn't have the same disruption that Bravo does because of Crippling and Starstruck, right? So then it's like, can she play that way as effectively? She's definitely not as good as Bravo, right? Because one, dominates better than Overpower. Two, Crippling and Starstruck are way better than Bet Big, but you know, +1 is neat. I hope, you know, Betsy gets some more tools as time goes on, because I really look forward to playing Betsy. But, you know, maybe I'll give Victor a try. Victor actually performed or won the most RTNs during week 2. So maybe that's something I look into to, you know, get some reps playing as or playing against other decks, things like that. But yeah, that was my run. Probably will still make more changes before the Pro Tour. I'm definitely not locked in on this list or anything, but I'm pretty happy with it overall. I don't have much else to say other than if you know anyone that's looking for a gold foil Luminaris, let me know. You can DM me on Discord at Alan Lube, or you can comment down below and I'll DM you. I don't know. But yeah, let me think of a question for all the prospective viewers. And I don't want to do anything too spicy because the community is already up in arms about Kano right now. So let's do a bit more of a fun question. What's a fun question I haven't asked yet? Let's see. Okay, yeah, I'm blanking. It's late. I'm tired. Random question could be, what's your favorite pizza place, I guess? I usually just get mine from Costco because it's good value. And I don't really have an opinion on like Pizza Hut, Domino's, Papa John's, all that. So I'm not exactly a pizza connoisseur. If you're from the East Coast, I'm sure you have your own opinions on pizza as well. I just kind of eat Costco pizza because it's cheap, and usually I'll get like a hot dog and a slice of pizza to share with my girlfriend. But yeah, that's all from me. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.